All right, I want to talk about the table and itable objects in Max and the concept of data mapping. So let's start with an itable object. The two objects are the same. Itable just gives you a graphic display inside the patcher, and table requires you to double click to do editing. And so we can talk about what it is. Let's type in an itable and lock the patch. It's a two-dimensional, an XY graph that has X values and Y values. The X values are addresses for storing data. The Y value is the data that's stored. We want to make this a little more usable. So what I'm going to do is define a minor seventh chord with an octave and use that as the data set that I'm going to map information onto. And data mapping is just taking data in one set and mapping the individual items or assigning the individual items to specific data in another set. So going to edit the table, select it, go into the info, and you can use the basic for the inspector. We want to make sure we save the data with a patcher so that whatever we've entered in opens up when we open the patcher new. Then the size is the number of X values. How many data points do you want in the itable? In this case, it's however many you define. I'm defining a 4-note chord with a 5th note for doubling the octave. So it's going to have a size of 5. The range is going to be from 0 to 12. And since we start counting with 0, the 12 is the highest value I want to store. I need to add 1 to that for range. And so 13. And now we see we have a manageable window of information I can work with. And you can see that if I move my cursor around, it tells you what X location and what Y value I have. And we can use that to draw out the minor seventh chord. At location 0, I have 0. I need 3 half steps up at location 1. Then 7 is the 5th. Then 10 is the minor 7th, and the octave is 12. Okay. And so that gives me the definition of intervals. Let's put this in. And you see I've already had my make node. I'm going to hook up a metro in a bit. I want to add it to some low note. So let's say plus 48. And let's have a number out of the table so we can actually see the values. Then they get added, then they go to make node. And now on top here, I can add a number. And so I'm sending X to the table, or itable. I'm getting the value Y out here. So I can type things in. If I type in a 0, I get the low note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I go beyond, I'm just going to get the same number. So it's mapping because the series here is independent of what comes out, but there's a very specific. 0 is always going to output 0. 1 will always output 3. So there's a very specific relationship from input to output. And that can go through. Now I can hook up and do just a very basic thing. Let's unlock the patcher and type in random. And then I need the range to be the same as the table size. So it's 5, which gives me values of 0 to 4 randomly. And come up a little bit. And I can hook up the metro. And if I start this, I'm getting random chord members of a minor seventh chord. So that's one way of addressing the table. Another way, let's open it up here, is instead of using random, I can use a counter object. So the counter is going to go through whatever range it has in order and then just cycle back to the beginning. I'm going to have it go from 0 to 4, which is the same number of values. It's 5, but it starts 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. When it gets to 4, it's going to cycle back around to 0. Let's bring another number box over here. And so the counter is just counting bangs. Let's hook up bang in the left inlet, lock the patch in now. All right, so that's going to access the table in order and just repeating this way through. Now if I want to, we can have one more thing that we can add to this patcher, just a new object. I can switch between the random access of the itable and the counter access with a graphic gate. So type in a new object and put Ggate. Sends input to one of two outlets. And it's a little bit different from most Max objects in that it wants what's going to pass through comes in the right inlet. The left inlet is a control, but I don't need the control because I can use the object. I can click on the object. And I'm going to expand it a little bit. Put it over here. And this will be the output to random. This will be the output to the counter. If I lock the patch, you can see I can click on it. And it's easy to see where the output's going because the blue line changes connections. So I'm going to start with the counter. Click on it. Get random. Click back and get the counter. And stop this. And that gives you just way of storing data, way of accessing the data with in two different ways, with the random or the counter. And the gate, graphic gate, lets you switch, take in one control or timing mechanism and switch where that goes between the two ways. So that's where I'm going to stop for now. There's other things we can do. We could start and stop the metro with notes. We could also reset the counter every time we play a note, but I'm going to leave that for another time to talk about and just leave this here. So that's it.